Hello and welcome again to another interview. We are the International Conflict Resolution Center based in Washington, D.C., a nonprofit, non-affiliated think tank dedicated to looking at novel solutions for conflict resolution, especially so-called frozen conflicts in Eastern Europe and in the Caucasus. We are delighted and honored today to have Dr. Farid Shafiyev from Azerbaijan joining us. He is a distinguished scholar running a think tank in Baku, looking at some of the same issues we do in the Caucasus, and particularly with respect to Azerbaijan's place in the world and in the very turbulent Caucasus region, of course, bracketed by big three neighbors of Turkey, Russia, and Iran. Dr. Shafiyev was an ambassador to Canada. He also was a delegate to the United Nations. He teaches at Adia University. There's nothing that this man has not done that has not been exemplary. So we could take the whole time talking about his accomplishments, but we are not going to do that today. We're going to talk about reflections on the Karabakh War. So let me start, Farid, with this, and it's going to be the difficult question. It's difficult because it's going to be personal, because a lot of people say all history is personal. Let me take you back to summer of 2020. Compare and contrast your approach, how you are as a scholar, how you are as a citizen of Azerbaijan back then, and compare and contrast it to today, to this very moment. This is a situation of great change for you and your country. Compare and contrast the two time frames, if you could.
Yeah. Well, thank you first of all for some kind words in introduction. Indeed, when you're speaking about stories, it's yes, it's many things are personal. It's intertwined, history of the countries, the regions, the global history, and our personal experience. When it comes to the summer 2020. I just would like to remind that in July 2020, we had clashes at the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan in so-called in Tovuz region. Armenians call it Tavush. Now we can say, because at that time it was not clear, now even some Armenian experts, they acknowledged that these clashes were provoked by Armenian side, because what happened basically, it was the 3-4 military serviceman, Azerbaijani serviceman they were on the vehicle, small vehicle like SUV, military SUV, and they were attacked by Armenians, also militaries. And the Armenians said, we crossed the border. Definitely, if you're gonna launch any attack, you are not going to do that on SUV, on small SUV. It was actually Soviet type SUV, was the people know it's very small. I mean, you won't launch military operation with such a small military vehicle. But and after that we had clashes, and quite well-known Azerbaijani general Hashim Poladov was killed. I think, if we took all these 30 years of occupation, the destruction, that probably was the lowest or highest point of humiliation Azerbaijani people felt. And that's why after 2 days, after those clashes, people went on the street. It was not organized. I would like to underline, it was not organized. It was quite chaotic. And actually, at the end of demonstration, which broke out. Some people, they stormed the parliament and destroyed, just vandalized. So I think now in retrospective, we can see that, the occupation which went unpunished for 30 years, resulted even in more actions, aggressive actions, far from the Karabakh region, which was occupied, which was kind of what Armenians claims as their own territory, but internationally recognized as Azerbaijan.
So that's the status quo in 2020. Now you have a situation of great change, but and victory, I might add. But there seems to be a strange status quo that underlines it in terms of where things go from here. Where do you see the trouble spots? I mean, and you can start anywhere you want. I mean, you can look at whether there's been a change of approach from Armenia. What is if you're trying to include the Russians in this as peacekeepers, they are a big deal. What about Iran? What about Turkey? But let's start with Armenia. Do you sense any change of approach or national of the face that they give to the international community versus what they're trying to do in terms of negotiations now that we have this reality in 2021? Or is it the same rhetoric and the same lack of policy response?
Yeah. Well, yes, let's consider first Armenia, because each, let's say, geopolitical or regional actor, Iran, Turkey, Russia, demands separate discussion and considerations. Armenia was defeated in the last year's war. It was basically an act of capitulation. They surrendered. They signed the ceasefire agreement, and besides the territories which Azerbaijan liberated during the military operation during the war, according to the agreement, Armenia also has withdrawn from 3 regions which was occupied, and which, by the way, some Western scholars, I don't know, for some reasons, they're trying to forget 4 resolutions of United Nations Security Council. And those resolutions specifically mention all these 3 regions: Agdam, Kalbajar, and Lachin. They've been occupied. Lachin was occupied in 92, but 2 others were occupied in 1993. And we have specifically 2 resolutions of United Nations. It's 822 and 853, which demands the withdrawal from Agdam and from Kalbajar. That has changed a lot. Armenia, I think, as a whole, as a country and society and diaspora, they went through the shock because they believed in their own myth, which made that they are invincible. But we know that during the First Karabakh War, the 2 very important factors which determined the victory of Armenia. First, Azerbaijan had civil war. Basically, three governments has changed during 92-93. Formally 5 head of states, but we speak about 3 different governments. And civil war, plus another important factor that the Russian armed forces, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they helped a lot to the Armenian side, especially in 1993. Though it should be acknowledged that at some point also Russians played some game in 1992 in summer, but when things settled after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia was on the Armenian side in 93, in 94, and recently, whereas the information emerged, some of the military support came personally from the Minister of Defense, Grachov, Russian Minister of Defense, for personal reasons, financial or some other reasons. Anyway, that's the history. But Armenia probably now, I sense it. Yes, they have trauma, they have shock, but also from especially the last couple of months, we see that we realized all their policies of occupation resulted in nothing. They lost everything. Some of the leaders, Armenian, including the Prime Minister Pashinyan, recently voiced it, so that the country should get rid of isolation, economic isolation, and that's only possible through the normalization of relationship with Turkey and Azerbaijan. And that's, I sense it. However, I think those leaders and say, you know, we have to recognize Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. We have to have normal relationship with our neighbors. So they, you know, occasionally they speak about Nagorno-Karabakh, you know, saying, you know, status of Nagorno-Karabakh should be dealt with, and, you know, basically they imply independence and then unification of Armenia. But that's rhetoric probably will remain in their vocabulary. But there is some positive changes. Let's be a bit, you know, some have some optimism.
Before we get into some specifics, I just wanted you to use what you just said and put it in this context. Do you think that Azerbaijan would be more, and Armenia, frankly, better served with bilateral talks with a sort of referee, rather than what has been the pattern, which seems to be the pattern over the last few decades, where you have outside forces coming in and trying to impose? I mean, you had the Madrid principles, you had the Kazan formula, and now you have the 3+3, which Georgia apparently is a lot more accepting of, but it always seems to involve other people kind of imposing something. Do you think that it would be more fruitful to have just bilateral talks with a sort of mediator or referee, and who might that mediator be? And I'm talking about every issue from landmines to economic development, that the whole plethora of issues.
It looks like for now we have mediators. Formally we have OSCE Minsk group, which is basically defunct now, is dead, because they are trying to bring back. So you mentioned Madrid principles. Yes, Madrid principles. They have 6 items. 4 items Azerbaijan forced Armenia to implement. We lost 3,000 people, almost 3,000 soldiers, 2,902. So, and the most important thing, that the Madrid principles was designed to make conflict resolution peacefully. But that didn't happen. So Madrid principle is no longer relevant, you know. So the Minsk group is trying to revive that. What you revive, I mean, what they're reviving, it's not clear. Only they're trying to revive 2 out of 6 principles, but that was in the package. So they have to realize they need new approaches. That's on the formal side of the mediation, let's say international mediation. What we have on the practical side, we have Russian mediation, Russian peacekeeping on our soil. And here we have 3 tracks, basically. We have peacekeeping mission, that's the one track. The second is the opening the transportation links, which comes from the trilateral agreement, opening up the economic links. And third, the delimitation and demarcations border. So in all these 3 tracks, Russia is primary broker, but we have also Turkey, especially on peacekeeping, though in limited, let's say, engagement. There is Turkish-Russian. We have also Georgia, which helped really to swap some of the detainees for the landmine maps. So basically, that's the.
Yeah,
I stopped basically at speaking about international mediation. Yeah, I mean, Azerbaijan is ready to work with all partners possible, but I said practically we have Russia, Turkey, not much engagement from EU and US. Georgia is also quite interested, but besides, I think I personally believe that we should try with Armenia to do bilaterally without any kind of mediators. It's very hard. At my level of the think tanks, I try to approach few people. It looks like at least I might have one counterpart, but some others actually rejected. I think still, impact of the war is very strong, and also I think first 30 years of the hatred, brainwashing left a big imprint on Armenian society. They believe that we have, the once Armenian President Kocharian said that Armenian and Azerbaijani people incompatible. He said it's around year 2000, 2001. As a historian, I don't believe in ancient hatred. Yes, we have some history of violence, 100 years or so, but from the historical point of view, it's relatively short. And if we look at generally our interaction, Middle Ages, ancient times, and even recently, 18th century, we lived relatively peacefully, interacted there is so much shared content, cultural content, the cuisine, music, and everything, which really manifest that we can live peacefully.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that bilateral negotiations, but on a micro scale with smaller, as you said, think tank to think tank or institution to institution, it might be university to university, or even people who are introducing infrastructure, and everything from tech, communications, microwaves to fiber optic to oil and gas, just so Armenians can heat their homes in the wintertime. Small scale things that that Azerbaijan, quite frankly, can exude some soft power influence, but not with the aim of destroying Armenia, but the aim of bringing it into, as President Pashinyan said, less isolation. What do you see? Do you see that as a promising venue for some lasting peace?
We should keep in mind, so-called track 2 diplomacy we are speaking now. Think tanks, journalists, some economic soft power, etc. Without some legal basis. If we look at the previous history, 30 years of occupation and what happened, some meetings happened between journalists, some cultural, the activists, some artists, singers. But that didn't bring any positive results, because I believe also that the track 2 is supplementary to the track 1. If we will have progress, if we have progress on track 1, if the two governments will sign peace treaty or recognize, and very important thing, both states should engage and produce a document which speaks about recognition of territorial integrity. Azerbaijan asks for the simple thing. That's simple. I mean, it's not that simple, but this is the must. European. I always tell the European peacemakers, they come, they suggesting something. In Europe, you establish peace after the Second World War based on the principle of territorial integrity, based on the respect to each other's sovereignty. And this is what Azerbaijan offering. The same, and on that basis, then we can, of course, develop, like, again, the Second World War, speaking Germany, France, and some other examples after bloodshed, but track to happen too. So we can do that, but without the first track, it will be hard. And you mentioned economic soft power. Actually, I'll tell you, Azerbaijan already manifested soft power, the good gesture. You're speaking about like economy, the energy. I would like to remind that the state oil company of Azerbaijan, SOCAR, in Georgia, gave gas, natural gas, for free of charge to Armenian churches. But we never really got thank you. One demand coming after another. Now also, many demands come to the Azerbaijani side. But we would like again to remind, we demand simple thing: the respect for our territorial integrity.
Let's talk about that then, because you have a situation where you have Russian peacekeepers, so-called peacekeepers. That's how they're labeled. Do you look at them as an impediment to a final document of some kind, or are they helpful, or have they just outlived their usefulness and we need to move on to another phase? Part of that question involves, do you think that the Armenians are using them as we say in the West, a crutch, or do they legitimately feel that they need the Russians there in order to feel safe? What are your opinions on that?
Yeah, I think for now, I think the presence of Russian peacekeeping is positive. I mean, it's difficult to expect that after so many years of war, just on the next day we're gonna really have peaceful relationship. So, but of course, sooner or later, and Azerbaijan manifested its determination. All 30 years we said that we're going to restore our territorial integrity. We're not going to give up our lands and put up with the fact of occupation. We repeatedly told, and at all levels, starting from the president to all people involved. And finally, we did that in last year. So now part of territory is under Russian peacekeeping control. And they have 5 years term, and now 4 years left, which can be extended for another 5 years. But let's say in 9 years maximum, maybe in 4 years, Azerbaijan sovereignty, Azerbaijan, let's say, administrative control will be fully restored over those territories. I think Russians peacekeeping, if it's really intention is benign, it helped to for smooth transition from the current standoff, from current animosity, to the peaceful coexistence, as it was, before the conflict. But if I mean, I don't want to now to speak negatively, but because we don't know what will happen after 4 years. But if some game will be played out, as I said, Azerbaijan will restore its territorial integrity. Anyway, I mean, in a full administrative control over those territories, which is now temporarily under Russians' peacekeeping control. We have Turkey here as our support, and I think generally everyone should realize that the geopolitical situation has changed in the region. But Azerbaijan is willing to work with all regional actors, including Russia. We have quite constructive relationship, and that's why we're working on regional cooperation to find some formula, because I think the economic foundation, economic cooperation, will support also political political, security structure. This is just happened in Europe. Again, I'm referring to the experience of Second World War. And sometimes some Europeans, I just would like to make this reminder. We say, you are not Europe, you are Asia, or you are Caucasus. You are sort of, in a very Orientalist manner, by saying you are worse. You don't have that experience. But let me remind that, in our region, we never had Holocaust. We never had, the sometimes scale of destruction, which we witnessed on European, historical scene, the extermination of, the whole ethnic group. Yes, we had destructions, unfortunately, and we try now to rebuild our territories. But yet, I think there is no reason to believe that one region is better than another. There is certain principles of international law where they should be universal.
Do you see any role for, say, the EU coming in as an additional referee, perhaps in more bilateral, direct talks, or the U.S., or an instrumentality of the United States? Some other actor other than Turkey, Russia, or even Iran, and we haven't talked about Iran yet. But would you see the EU having a role there?
I think they can be helpful, both United States and European Union, in terms of the rebuilding region from the war, and that should be fair. Approach should be fair. For example, just let me remind that the European Union pledged the assistance to Armenia, 2.6 billion euro, and 150 million to Azerbaijan. That's not indeed the balanced assistance, though some European says, the Azerbaijan does not accept the credit conditions. Anyway, I think some more balanced approach should be designed by European policymakers. But yes, I think by boosting economy, by rebuilding, destroyed infrastructure, both United States and the European Union might have a positive role. Plus, we have really, especially speaking about the Europeans, they have some positive, experience in terms of the, community buildings, reconciliation efforts, different cases we have in the Balkans, sometimes positive, sometimes negatives, yet the European institutions very strong in this domain.
Do you think that your think tank has studied every angle of this? Do you think realistically that there can be a document that can be engineered within the next 5 years that will cover territorial integrity for Azerbaijan, but also give the Armenians some way of building, an integrative economy and integrate into the general politics of the Caucasus? Do you see something like that within the next 5 years?
To have some comprehensive document, I think that will be that's unrealistic to have comprehensive document. But what we can have, we have some elements or some building blocks. Let's say agreement, and partially we have agreement on the opening of the transportation links. We have documents signed on January 11th in Moscow this year. Which set up the trilateral commission to work on opening up the transportation links. That's the one direction. The second, we can work on delimitation and demarcation, which requires the recognition of territorial integrity by both sides, mutual recognition of territorial integrity, which is it's not easy, and sometimes it's open up to the false interpretations. For example, recently the Armenian side said, we recognize Azerbaijan's territorial integrity in 1991, but that does not apply to Nagorno-Karabakh. So basically, it's one sentence denies one part of the sentence denies in our part of the sentence, because the Azerbaijan was accepted to the United Nations as a whole with Nagorno-Karabakh, and that is reconfirmed by the United Nations Security Council resolution. So if you recognize Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, that automatically implies that Nagorno-Karabakh is part of Azerbaijan. So that's why, always there's some tricky things. That's the second element. The third element can be about, arrangement for the Armenians in Karabakh. And so far, we have some progress on the transportation track. Trilateral commission is working. So it's not the comprehensive treaty, but we can have, several treaties, small treaties, which will produce a stable security environment.
Well, let me ask you this before I do finish off on just asking your opinions about Iran. Would an inducement let me just frame the question here. We talked when we were on our field visit and visited you and ADA University. A lot of talk then has turned into reality. There's been massive rebuilding of infrastructure, particularly transportation infrastructure and housing in some of these occupied areas. Would it be possible to extend to the Armenians, say, look, this is what we accomplished here. This could be yours in Karabakh, and then in Armenia proper, if we could just sit down and talk. Do you know of any entreaties to the Armenians that have basically said, look at what we've accomplished. This can be yours. Something as direct like as that kind of a discourse, or has that been rejected, or has that not been really broached with them? What are your views there?
Armenians now, as I said, they went through trauma and shock, self-inflicted trauma, because I said it's the result of a policy of occupation. Probably we need some time. Even they see that there is sharp contrast, there is big development in Azerbaijan. We built the airport, international airport, for 8 months. And, I'm sure in 4 years, we will rebuild some of the important cities, settlements, the roads, and people will move there. The 60+% of refugees, internal displaced persons, expressed a desire to return. So that, of course, will have impact on Armenian consciousness, mentality, but I don't think they are now ready to accept. I think we need time. Yes, I think time probably will work.
I understand. Well, let me finish off with this. Iran, do you look at them as a complicating factor, a welcome part of the 3+3? How do you look at this currently and in the future?
It is a complicated factor. Though all these years we try to be friendly with them, but we knew, and recently even they acknowledge they helped the Armenians during the first Karabakh war. And from the beginning of Azerbaijan independence, from the first day, we were not comfortable with our independence. But now we don't have time for more, let's say, general discussion about Iran-Azerbaijan relationship. But, the country which made the foreign policy, even in their constitution, they have obligation, they have to support the Muslim countries. But they openly said, if Armenia is much more important for us. They told me, even I had private discussions, so we need to have access to Armenia, those corridors between Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan can cut us from Armenia, which is not true. I mean, all these transportation links is not going to cut anyone from any partner, because with modern technology you can have bypasses, tunnels. But anyway, Iran had always friendly relationship with Armenia, supported them. Though formally, officially, Iran was always saying we have to acknowledge that they support Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. We try to build quite constructive relationship, especially with the last government before Raisi, Rouhani government. I think we had quite positive engagement. Everything has changed into negative with this incumbent leadership. Though the last 2-3 weeks, we see that kind of Iranian side backtracked from the aggressive rhetoric towards Azerbaijan. And again, Azerbaijan is open. We said repeatedly, we support the formula which include Iran as a regional partner.
Well, with that, I want to end our discussion. I mean, because this is a time, as I said, the theme is of great change, and the future is going to be interesting to say the least. But at least the bloodshed is at least done, and we have at least an equilibrium that we can work from. And I'm sure we will hear more from you and your think tank on the policy alternatives and studying these problems. And we are, of course, are dedicated to that as well. So hopefully between the two of us, we can come up with something
Thank you.
Workable for the region. Thank you again, Farid. Thank you so much for sharing this with us.
I appreciate also this opportunity. Thank you very much for work what you're doing.